Hey everybody, this is Dan Dismek here for deucescrack.com, and today we're going to talk about firing the second barrel in a heads-up PLO match. You'd think that with 4 cards you'd hit pretty much every flop or turn, and that's certainly not the case. There's a lot of room to be made in bluffing in PLO, so today we're going to identify some good spots to barrel the turn as a bluff. Again, we're focusing mainly on defaults here, so you can easily deviate from any of these spots. Our main decision to fire on the turn is going to be a function of the effect that the turn card has on the board texture. Assuming our opponent is calling a reasonable flop range, you can, kind of deduce what their turn action is going to be based on A, the cards in our hand, and B, what the turn card did to the board. So let's just take a look at this example here. We raise pre-flop with the ace, king, queen, 9, and the flop get called on an ace on a jack 10 3 2 hard board. A couple of things to note. On this board, we do have the nut flush blocker on the flop, so our opponent can't have the nut flush draw, and we just obviously flopped a very strong draw. We get called, and the turn is a 10 of spades. So let's just think about a few things. The first one is that there are obviously a lot of draws. Despite the fact that we have the nut flush blocker, there are a lot of flush draws and straight draws that our opponent could be calling with once here. The second one is this is a bad card for top pair, or if our opponent did maybe flat some bad kings or even aces, that's a bad card for them too. No one wants to see the 10 pair really, except for a set or a 10. But if our opponent does have a 10, we have equity versus them, which is good. We could still win, hit an 8 and value bet, or hit an ace and value bet if we think our opponent's calling that light, or just check back. As I said before, we do have the ace of hearts. The nut flush draw is not out there, so our opponent I think it's much easier to fold a weaker flush draw here. And of course, finally, we have position, which is always king. We don't have to decide what to do first on the river card, so if we do get called, we can maybe fire a third barrel, or like I said, if we do hit an 8 or something, we can just check back if we don't think our opponent's calling with worse than a full house. So what does this all mean? It means I like betting the turn here quite a bit. For all the reasons I mentioned before, it's a good bluffy card. Our hand does have some equity, but it doesn't have so much showdown value. And a lot of the hands that do beat us, if it goes check, 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 are hands that would fold to a bet here. So I really like firing once more. So let's look at another example. Here we raise jack 10 9 7 double suited and get called. Flop is 10 9 3 2 hearts. And our opponent check calls the flop. And the turn is kind of an interesting card in the queen of hearts. So take a moment and think about what your plan here would be. Like I said, I always say you can pause if you'd like, but for now we're going to go ahead and continue through. The first thing to consider is our hand does have value, more so than the other one. If our opponent did call with some bad kings or has like ace 10 3 or something like that, we're actually ahead of them with top 2 pair, and a free card is pretty good for us, as well as a cheap showdown. The queen of hearts really does complete a lot of draws. We have no heart blockers at all. It is kind of a scary card for some straight draws, so I don't hate this card, but I think with a hand right in, we want to have some check back range that could potentially call or raise some rivers, and I mean if we fill up. This all in all is not that great of a turn card for our hand, and like I mentioned, we have no blockers. We have blockers to a set, I guess, but no flush draw blockers. Maybe if we had the ace of hearts in our hand, we could maybe use the nut flush blocker and have some backup equity, so it's a pretty good spot for it. But as is for now, this is a spot where I'm going to go ahead and check. Like I said, I want to have some hands that I'm checking back, and I think here, you can make up your mind on an offsuit 8 or king river, and obviously a 10 or 9 is going to be good. And who's to say it doesn't go check, 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 and you win? I think this is way too thin of a spot to be worrying about value. Anyway, guys, hopefully this was helpful. This has been Dan Dismek for deucescrack.com. Any interesting heads-up PLO hands, or just any interesting hands at all, please check out our forums, and I look forward to reading your posts.